He was hanging between life and death, fingers torn and bleeding, boots kicking against empty air. No rope, no backup, just the sheer drop of Skyfall Bluff yawning beneath him. Sergeant Nathan Rourke's grip on the jagged root was slipping with every heartbeat until a flash of movement caught his eye. Two identical girls in forest pink jackets skidded to the cliff's edge, a black and tan German shepherd bracing at their side, amber eyes locked on him. They weren't climbers, they weren't soldiers, but in the next 30 seconds they would decide whether a U.S. Army sergeant lived or vanished into the mist forever. Clara Whitford knew every bend of the trail along Skyfall Bluff, or at least she thought she did. The path wound like a thin scar along the mountainside, dropping away to an open chasm where pine trees clung stubbornly to the rock face below. It was the kind of place that both dared and warned you in the same breath. She had walked it dozens of times with her twin sister Sophie and their dog Titan, but today the air felt different, charged, restless. Clara was the first to notice Titan's pace slowing. At 6 years old, the German shepherd still moved with a precise, purposeful gait, his black and tan coat catching threads of morning light. Most days his ears twitched at the faintest rustle in the underbrush, but now they were rigid, locked toward the horizon. Clara glanced back at Sophie, who was crouched to examine a flat, silver-gray pebble. Sophie was always collecting things, stones, feathers, tiny pine cones, her pockets an archive of moments she didn't want to forget. "Come on, Soph," Clara called, her voice firm but without impatience. She had always been the one to take charge when things tilted toward the unpredictable. Sophie jogged to catch up, her braid bouncing against her back. "I think this one's a moonstone," she said, holding up the pebble. Clara barely glanced at it. Her focus was on Titan. The shepherd had stopped dead in his tracks, body coiled, tail stiff. His gaze drilled into something ahead on the trail, invisible to the girls from where they stood. Clara had learned not to ignore that kind of stillness in him. It meant he'd found something worth noting, whether that something was harmless or dangerous. "Titan?" Clara took a few steps forward, her sneakers grinding against the gravel. The dog's ears swiveled, but he didn't look back. Then, without warning, he lunged forward, claws kicking up dirt as he bounded toward the cliff. "Titan!" Clara's shout cracked the air. She and Sophie broke into a run, dodging the low brush that clawed at their legs. By the time they caught up, Titan was crouched near the lip of the bluff, muscles taut, nose pointed straight down. Clara dropped to her knees beside him and froze. A man dangled just below them, one hand gripping the twisted root of a lone tree that jutted from the rock face. His boots swung over nothing but open air. Loose fragments of earth trickled past him into the void. He lifted his head, squinting against the sunlight. His face was sun-browned and streaked with dust, beads of sweat tracing slow paths down his temples. The sharp angles of his jaw and the squared set of his shoulders spoke of military precision, though now that discipline was strained by sheer endurance. "Careful," he rasped, his voice low but caring. "The ground here, it's loose." Clara's heart hammered in her chest, but she forced herself to think. "Are you hurt?" "Not badly," he said, shifting his grip. "But I won't last long." His fingers were raw, dirt embedded in the torn skin along his knuckles. Sophie, pale but composed, knelt just far enough from the edge to see him clearly. "I'm calling for help." She thumbed her phone awake, the screen reflecting a faint tremor in her hands. Her voice was steady, though, as she spoke to the dispatcher. "We're at Skyfall Bluff, near the North Ridge. Yes, he's alive. Hurry, please." Clara scanned their surroundings. The trail behind them narrowed before vanishing into a cluster of boulders. No quick way for rescuers to get here. If they waited, the man might lose his grip before anyone arrived. The dog's gaze hadn't wavered. Titan lay low, the tips of his paws pressed into the dirt, ready to react. Clara had seen him like this once before, when a neighbor's child had wandered too close to the riverbank. It was the stance of a guardian. "My name's Nathan Rourke," the man called up between breaths. He flicked his eyes toward Titan. "Good dog you've got there." "I'm Clara. This is Sophie and Titan," she said. "They're on their way, but it might take a while." Nathan nodded once, a subtle acknowledgement of the situation's weight. "Figures." Sophie ended the call, looking between her sister and the man. 15 minutes, maybe more." Clara didn't like those odds. She could see the tremor in Nathan's arms now, the way his boots scraped for a foothold that wasn't there. If he slipped, there'd be no stopping his fall. She crawled closer, testing the stability of the ground. A scattering of small stones slid away under her palm. "We're not just going to stand here," she told him, voice firm. "We'll think of something." His mouth twitched. Not quite a smile, but close. "I'm in your hands, then." For a moment, there was only the sound of the wind threading through the pines and the faint scrape of Nathan's boots against the cliffside. Titan shifted, inching nearer to the edge, his nose working the air. Clara glanced at her sister. "Do you still have the rope from Dad's old gear?" Sophie's eyes lit with recognition. "In my pack." She swung it off her shoulders and pulled out a coiled length of faded climbing rope. It wasn't new, but it was strong enough, at least she hoped. Nathan's gaze lifted at the sight of it, something like relief flickering in his eyes. "That could work," he said, "if you've got an anchor point." Clara's mind was already mapping possibilities. A sturdy pine stood a few yards back from the edge, its roots deep, its trunk thick enough to bear weight. "You hold him steady," Clara told Titan, as though the dog understood the command beyond its tone. She handed Sophie the rope's loose end. "Be careful," Sophie murmured, her voice tight. "Always." Clara took the other end and began looping it around the pine's base, cinching it with a knot her father had taught her. She remembered his words. "Knots can save lives. Tie them like you mean it." By the time she returned to the edge, Nathan's grip had shifted again, his breathing faster. Clara tossed the rope toward him, and it fell just within his reach. His fingers caught it on the second try. He wound it around his wrist, exhaling through clenched teeth. "All right, pull slow. If the edge crumbles, it's over." Clara braced her feet, Sophie gripping the rope behind her. Titan stood beside them, teeth clenched around the rope as well, his weight adding to theirs. Nathan began to climb, inch by inch. The tension in the rope thrummed through Clara's palms. Her shoulders ached, but she didn't let go. They had no idea that this desperate moment on the cliffside was only the first thread in something far larger, something that would bind the three of them. And Titan, in ways none of them could yet see. Nathan Rourke had been dangling from the cliffside for what felt like an eternity. In reality, it was barely over 15 minutes, but each second pressed into him like a weight. His arms trembled from strain, blood from the cuts on his palms trickling down the rickety root that was the only thing between him and the mist-covered abyss. He tried not to look down. He knew the jagged rocks below were hidden by fog, but their presence was certain. His breathing was shallow, more from conserving energy than fear. Nathan wasn't a man prone to panic. Afghanistan had taught him what true danger looked like, but this was different. Out there, the enemy was visible. Here, the fight was silent, the killer was gravity, and the battlefield was a mountainside that would not care who won. Clara crouched near the tree line, keeping a firm hand on Titan's collar. The German shepherd was alert, ears pricked forward, muscles taut. His dark amber eyes didn't leave Nathan, as if willing the soldier to hold on just a little longer. "Stay," Clara whispered, her voice steady despite the way her stomach twisted in knots. Sophie, meanwhile, darted toward a sturdy pine a few feet away, spotting a weathered coil of climbing rope half buried in the dirt. Nathan's pack, she realized. It must have been flung upward when he fell. She tugged it free, the coarse fibers rough against her fingers. Sophie was the quieter of the twins, her mind often working faster than her voice could keep up. At school, she was the problem solver, the one who could untangle a knot or fix a jammed locker when no one else could. She had inherited their late father's patience, something Clara lacked in moments like this. "Clara, help me tie this to the tree," Sophie called, already looping the rope around the thick trunk. Nathan tried to help from below, using what strength he had left to lift his body toward them, but a sharp jolt of pain in his shoulder reminded him of the fall's brutality. The rope had to hold. His entire weight and perhaps his life was about to depend on two 11-year-old girls and a dog. Clara and Sophie worked in near silence, the only sounds the whipping of wind and Titan's low growl rumbling in his chest. Clara tested the knot, pulling hard, then tossed the loose end over the cliff's edge. "We've got you!" she shouted. Her voice carried farther than she expected, echoing faintly off the stone walls of Skyfall Bluff. Nathan reached for the rope, his fingers clumsy from numbness. But before he could get a proper grip, a gust of wind slammed into the cliff face. He swung sideways, his boot scraping against stone. Titan barked sharply, a warning that seemed almost human in its urgency. Nathan gritted his teeth, willed his aching hands to work, and finally caught the rope in both palms. He wrapped it quickly around his forearm, securing it against another slip. As the girls began to pull, Nathan climbed in short, deliberate movements. Every pull of the rope burned in their hands, but neither twin slowed. Titan positioned himself behind Clara, his teeth gripping the rope just above the ground, anchoring them against the force dragging Nathan down. The muscles in his jaw flexed, and his low growl turned into a steady, determined rumble. Halfway up, Nathan's foot found a narrow ledge. He paused there, breathing hard, sweat stinging his eyes despite the mountain chill. "You're doing great," Sophie called down, her voice cracking but firm. It was strange, he thought, how in all his years of service, some of the bravest words he'd heard came from children. Down in the valley, the first signs of an early snowstorm began to show. Though the sky above them remained a mottled gray, the wind carried a different bite, now sharper, colder, urgent. Far away, the faint crackle of a radio in a ranger station relayed weather warnings. But on the bluff, none of them could hear it. Nathan made another push upward, and the twins leaned back with all their weight, using the slope behind them as leverage. Titan's claws dug into the earth, his entire frame straining with effort. Another few feet and Nathan would be close enough for them to see his expression, jaw clenched, eyes fixed upward, face pale beneath the dirt and sweat. Then from somewhere behind the tree line, a branch snapped. Titan's ears flicked, but he didn't let go of the rope. Clara's head jerked up, scanning the shadows between the pines. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, a flicker of black against the gray forest. But then it was gone. She forced herself to refocus. Nathan was still climbing, and they weren't done yet. They pulled again and again. And again. Inch by inch, the gap between Nathan and safety closed. His arms shook violently now, his breath coming in sharp bursts, but his eyes never left the top. He could hear Titan's steady growl, feel the vibration of it through the rope in his hands. That sound anchored him as much as the girls did. By the time Nathan reached the last stretch, the muscles in his back felt like fire. Clara braced herself, Sophie locked her knees, and Titan gave one final heave backward. Nathan's gloved hand broke over the cliff edge. Clara dropped to her stomach, grabbed his wrist, and pulled with everything she had left. The world tilted for a heartbeat, and then he was up. Nathan collapsed onto the rocky ground, gasping, every nerve in his body singing with exhaustion. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the wind's howl and the heavy panting of both man and dog. Then slowly, Nathan pushed himself to sit, meeting the eyes of the twins and the German shepherd, who had, against all odds, refused to let go. "You saved my life," he said, voice low, raw. It wasn't the first time someone had pulled him from the brink, but it was the first time the rescuers weren't soldiers or adults at all. He looked at Titan, who stood tall beside the girls, his chest heaving, but his eyes sharp. Nathan gave a faint, wry smile. "And you, soldier," he added, reaching out a hand for the dog to sniff. Titan's nose brushed his glove, and for the first time since the fall, Nathan felt the weight in his chest ease. Somewhere far below the bluff, the fog shifted, revealing the jagged teeth of stone that would have claimed him. Nathan didn't look at them for long. He was already thinking of the next step, getting down safely, thanking the girls properly, and figuring out how in the world he had ended up in a situation where children were his lifeline. And above all, he wondered about that shadow in the trees. By the time they reached the foot of Skyfall Bluff, Nathan's legs felt like lead. The twins flanked him on either side, Titan ranging just ahead, glancing back every few seconds as if to check his pace. The descent had been careful but exhausting, and Nathan's shoulder throbbed where the root had cut into him. He could taste iron in his mouth, a reminder of just how close the cliff had come to winning. Whitford House came into view just as the first flakes of snow began to spin through the air. It was an old two-story farmhouse with weathered white paint and a porch that creaked with every step. Meredith Whitford stood at the door, her figure framed in warm light spilling from inside. She was tall and lean, with a presence that seemed to fill the space around her. The lines at the corners of her eyes spoke of years lived hard-widowed young, raising two daughters on her own, and running a bookshop that had once been the heart of town before the fire took half its shelves. "Inside quickly," Meredith urged, holding the door wide. Her voice was brisk, practical, but her eyes lingered on Nathan with the quick, assessing glance of someone who had learned to measure strangers in seconds. Titan padded past her without hesitation, shaking snow from his coat. The warmth of the house hit Nathan like a wave. The smell of wood smoke mixed with cinnamon drifted from somewhere in the kitchen, and for a moment he almost forgot the cold. Sophie slipped away to hang Titan's leash on a hook near the door, while Clara fetched a wool blanket and draped it over Nathan's shoulders. Meredith's gaze was steady as she spoke. "You're lucky they found you. That bluff has claimed more than its share of lives." Her words carried weight, as though she wasn't just speaking from rumor. Nathan didn't miss it. "I was out there for training," Nathan replied, his voice low. It wasn't untrue, but it wasn't the whole truth either. His boots were still wet, leaving dark prints on the worn wooden floor. "Didn't expect the terrain to give way like that." Meredith arched an eyebrow but didn't push. She poured him a mug of coffee, the steam curling up into the dim light. "You'll need more than caffeine. There's stew on the stove. Sit. Eat." Titan settled at Nathan's feet, his head resting on his paws but eyes open, watchful. Nathan reached down absently to scratch behind his ear, and the dog's tail thumped softly against the floor. Over dinner, the twins talked over each other, recounting every detail of the rescue. Nathan listened, smiling faintly at their unpolished storytelling. Meredith didn't interrupt, though her eyes narrowed at certain details, like the shadow Clara had thought she saw in the trees. When the girls had finished, Nathan leaned back in his chair. "Truth is," he began, "I'm not just training. I'm looking for someone, an old friend, a fellow soldier. He disappeared near here years ago. I thought I might find a lead." Meredith's spoon paused halfway to her mouth. "You think he's still alive?" "I don't know," Nathan admitted, "but I owe it to him to find out." Silence settled over the table. Outside, the snow thickened, cloaking the world beyond the windows. Meredith was the first to speak again, her voice quieter now. "People here don't talk about certain places, Skyfall Bluff, the old mine, the woods beyond it. Bad things happen there." Before Nathan could ask more, Titan's head snapped up. His ears went rigid, a low growl building in his throat. The sound was deep, primal, and it froze everyone at the table. Then came the noise, a faint crunch of boots on snow, just outside the porch. Meredith's eyes flicked toward the front door. "Stay here." But Titan was already moving, his growl rising as he padded toward the entryway. Nathan pushed himself to his feet, following the dog. Clara and Sophie exchanged wide-eyed looks but stayed in their seats. Through the frosted glass, Nathan saw it, a dark silhouette standing just beyond the porch steps. The figure didn't move, just lingered in the storm like a shadow that had forgotten how to vanish. Nathan opened the door a crack, the cold air rushing in. "Can I help you?" he called. The figure stepped forward into the glow of the porch light. It was a man, broad-shouldered, with a beard that looked as though it had been grown more from necessity than style. His eyes were pale gray, darting over Nathan's face, then down to Titan, and finally toward the window where the twins watched. "Wrong house," the man muttered, then turned and walked away, boots crunching over snow until he disappeared into the swirling dark. Nathan didn't buy it for a second. He lingered at the door until even the sound of the footsteps faded, Titan still standing tense beside him. When he finally closed the door, Meredith was watching him from the hallway, her expression unreadable. "You'll want to lock that," she said simply, before turning back toward the kitchen. Nathan did as she said, but his mind was already working, piecing together the shadow in the trees, the man in the snow, and the place everyone here avoided speaking about. He had come to this town chasing a ghost from his past. Now it seemed the ghost might be watching him back. The snowstorm had rolled in hard by nightfall, the kind that swallows sound and turns the horizon into a smear of white. Nathan sat in the living room, shoulder wrapped in fresh bandages, the crackle of the wood stove filling the silence. Clara and Sophie were curled up on the rug beside Titan, whispering about the man they'd seen outside earlier. The dog hadn't left the door since, his gaze fixed on the world beyond the frost-clouded glass. A knock shattered the stillness. 3 sharp raps. Meredith crossed the room, opening the door to reveal 2 figures in heavy orange jackets, stamped with the Whitford County Search and Rescue emblem. The older of the 2, Captain Reed Mallory, was a broad man in his late 50s, weathered face framed by a salt and pepper beard. His eyes, quick and sharp, scanned the room before settling on Nathan. "We got your location from the distress beacon. You're lucky to be breathing." The second rescuer, Leah Grant, was a woman in her early 30s, compact and wiry, with dark hair tied back in a braid. Her expression carried both relief and suspicion. "We were combing the bluff for another missing hiker when your signal came through. Thought we'd be pulling a body out of the ravine." "I had help," Nathan said, glancing toward the twins and Titan. "If it weren't for them, I wouldn't be here." Reed's gaze shifted to the girls, softening briefly before he turned back to Nathan. "You'll need to come into town with us. Medical check, debrief, and maybe you can explain what you were doing on Skyfall Bluff in the middle of a storm." Meredith's voice cut in before Nathan could answer. "He'll go in the morning. He's not moving from this house tonight." It wasn't a suggestion, and Reed seemed to know better than to argue with her. They left behind a radio, promising to check in at dawn. But even after the search and rescue truck's taillights faded into the storm, the unease lingered. Nathan sat with Meredith at the kitchen table while the twins fed Titan scraps under the counter. "There's something I didn't tell them," Nathan admitted, keeping his voice low. "I wasn't just training. I was tracking a lead, something connected to a friend who vanished years ago. The trail led me here, to these cliffs." Meredith's brow furrowed. "Skyfall Bluff isn't a place people wander into by accident. People disappear there." Her gaze dropped to her hands, fingers tightening on the edge of her coffee mug. "My brother drowned there when we were kids. Or that's what they told me. I've never been sure." Before Nathan could respond, Titan's sudden sharp bark rattled the air. He was at the front door, hackles raised, staring into the darkness beyond the porch. The twins froze mid-giggle. Nathan stood, wincing at the pull in his shoulder, and joined Titan. Through the swirling snow, headlights cut a dim beam toward the house. A black pickup truck idled at the edge of the drive, its engine growling softly. The windows were tinted, the license plate half obscured by grime. No one stepped out. Meredith moved to stand beside Nathan, her jaw set. "That truck's been around before," she murmured. "Parked near the old fire road last month. Nobody knew who it belonged to." The pickup lingered for what felt like an eternity before the lights swung away, disappearing into the curtain of snow. Titan didn't relax until the sound of the engine faded entirely. Later, after the twins had gone to bed, Nathan spread a folded map across the table. The paper was worn, the edges frayed. He traced a line along the bluff, stopping where a faint X was marked near an old mining road. "This is where my friend was last seen, and it's not far from where I fell." Meredith studied the map, her eyes shadowed. "If you go back out there, you won't be going alone. Not with whatever's circling this house." She glanced toward the stairs where Titan now lay curled at the top like a sentry. "And maybe not without him." Nathan didn't argue. He knew better. Out here, in a town where snow covered more than just the ground, trust was a rare currency, and he'd just been given a small deposit. 1 month later, Whitford's main square had been transformed into something rare for the quiet mountain town of Celebration. Strings of winter lights crossed from rooftop to rooftop, the scent of spiced cider curling through the cold air. At the center stood a small wooden stage draped with the American flag, a podium set beside 3 polished plaques, and a single medal gleaming under the overhead lamps. Nathan stood to the side, his arm now free of bandages, but still held a little stiff. Clara and Sophie, dressed in matching navy coats with knitted red scarves, shifted nervously behind him. Titan sat at their feet, his black and tan coat brushed to a shine, amber eyes scanning the crowd like a watchman. The mayor of Whitford, Henry Calder, a stout man in his late 60s with a voice that always seemed to boom louder than necessary, stepped to the podium. "Tonight," he began, "we honor 3 residents who prove that courage doesn't always wear a uniform." He gestured toward the twins and Titan. When Sergeant Nathan Cole was in danger on Skyfall Bluff, it was Clara Whitford, Sophie Whitford, and their German Shepherd Titan who pulled him to safety at great risk to themselves. A cheer rose from the townspeople, and Nathan found himself smiling despite the knot in his chest. He stepped forward, taking the microphone. If not for them, I wouldn't be standing here. They gave me a chance to finish what I came here to do, and that matters more than any medal I've ever worn. His voice caught slightly, though he masked it quickly. Heroes come in all sizes. Some walk on 2 legs, some on 4. The mayor pinned the Civilian Medal of Bravery to each of the twins' coats. For Titan, there was a leather collar with a small silver emblem engraved with the town's crest. Clara beamed, Sophie clutched the medal like it was a treasure, and Titan merely flicked his ears, eyes calm but alert, as if he knew the weight of the moment. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed toward the cider stalls, but Nathan motioned for Clara to stay behind. He reached into his coat and pulled out a small, weathered scrap of parchment. The edges were torn, the ink faded. "Found this near where I fell," he said quietly. "It's part of a larger map, and I think it's connected to the disappearance I told your mother about." Clara's eyes widened. "Why give it to me?" "Because sometimes the safest place isn't the most obvious one," Nathan replied, glancing toward Titan. "You and Sophie, and him, you're the only ones I trust right now." Titan gave a soft chuff, as if in agreement, before sitting closer to Clara. Meanwhile, Meredith stood near the reopened Whitford book nook, greeting neighbors who stopped to congratulate her. The shop, once on the brink of closing, had been brought back to life thanks to the attention the rescue story had drawn. People came in not just for books, but to hear the story firsthand from the twins, and Meredith had reluctantly become the unofficial historian of Skyfall Bluff lore. As the night wound down, Nathan lingered by the bookshop window, watching the twins show Titan his new collar like it was the crown jewels. Meredith joined him. "Whatever's on that map," she said without looking at him, "it's going to pull you back out there." "It already has," Nathan admitted. His gaze flicked toward Clara, the folded scrap now tucked into her coat pocket. "But maybe this time, I won't be going alone." Titan turned his head toward the street, ears pricking. For just a moment, Nathan thought he saw the same black pickup parked at the far end of the square. But when he blinked, it was gone. The celebration might have ended, but the feeling in his gut told him the real story was just beginning. Sometimes the smallest acts of courage leave the deepest marks on our lives. A medal may shine for a moment, but the trust, loyalty, and love we give each other can last forever. Nathan's story with Clara, Sophie, and Titan is a reminder that heroes are often the ones quietly standing beside us, ready to pull us back when the world tries to push us over the edge. If you believe loyalty and bravery can change a life, share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us about a moment when someone, or even a faithful dog, stood by you when it mattered most. And if you want more stories that honor courage, love, and second chances, like this video and follow our channel so you will never miss the next one.